Welcome back to another episode of Called to the Table. We are so excited because we have a very exciting episode for you today. I am Liv, and I am one half of a guest and one half of an actual Called to the Table member today.
I'm John. I'm a full Call to the Table member, but we'll just say it's going to be fun one way or another.
I'm Jordan. I'm a full Call to the Table member, and I'm also half of a marriage in Call to the Table.
Very true.
I'm a full member of Call to the Table, and my name is Caroline, by the way. And I'm the only one here who is all by myself.
Aww.
But that's okay. No, it's okay. I'm stating it for the record.
So, as Liv said, she's half of a guest and half of a member today. And the reason why is because we have a special guest, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, which is Pizza and Parsecs, starring Olivia and David. So, Olivia and David, introduce yourselves.
Hi.
Hello, I'm the lesser half and the lesser talent of Pizza and Parsecs.
No!
Dude,
You've been planning that all day, haven't you?
No, that's just always on my mind. You're the talent and better half of Pizza and Parsecs.
You went over this already, Liv.
I don't agree with that at all.
You don't have to agree with it for it to be true.
He's just gonna keep saying it either way, so...
Liv, should you reintroduce yourself as the other half of Pizza and Parsecs?
I'm the other half of Pizza and Parsecs.
Oh, good grief. Go ahead.
And we are a geek and nerd podcast covering a wide variety of topics, from Twi'leks to Tonks, from Hogwarts to Hyrule, Jedi to Justice League, from wizarding worlds to galaxies far, far away. Everything is on the table, and we are Pizza and Parsecs.
Do you want to go again? Everything's on the table.
On the table.
You had such a good roll, and then bam.
I don't know tables as well as the table team, apparently.
Oh.
Y'all have a dedicated team for that.
Very true. So, because we are having a guest speaker, I'm actually going to normally I do the introduction of our episode, but I'm actually going to turn that over to Olivia because she, like she said, is half the guest and half, or a quarter of Call to the Table. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Sweet. Well, first off, I just want to say it's really exciting because I've been making comments about my fiance for so many episodes, and he's actually on our show now. So
Woo-hoo!
I don't have to be like, oh, the fiance. Be like, Dave. His name is Dave. I'm not hiding your name for any reason, but I wanted to have you on at some point and then announce you're Dave.
I'm glad you're not hiding me.
I'm not hiding you.
She's embarrassed.
I'm glad I don't have to edit out your name anymore.
I'm not embarrassed by you.
That's going to make editing a whole lot easier for John now.
Yeah, because I'll say his name now. Dave.
Well, you've been saying his name. We just have to take it out.
Yeah, you know, I was building up the hype. My fancy fiance over here. Yeah, so we're super excited because for this week in our quote-unquote crossover event, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the comparison of Star Wars and its biblical themes and theologies. So let's go ahead and start off with just a general topic of the general themes of the movies matching the Bible. So I wanted to turn it over, Dave, we usually go around the table, but we're all still social distancing. So usually I start, but I'm going to go ahead and give it to you if you want to start. Do you want to start these things off? No? Okay, cool. We're going to start with John.
Jeez, Liv.
I kid. We're not going to make our guest start first. We don't do that. I'm just nitpicking at you. Sorry. I love you. I'll go ahead and start things off, and we'll go in our normal order, and you'll end things off. Is that cool? Sweet. So a couple of things that I wanted to kind of pinpoint as far as themes within the movie kind of matching the Bible, being that there's a huge topic of destiny that is spoken throughout the entire series. Anakin's destiny being, the person who's going to destroy the Sith, essentially. Luke Skywalker's destiny, just the whole Skywalker line. And I wanted to refer a couple of things from the Bible in this theme of destiny, being Ecclesiastes 6:10, being whatever exists has already been named, and what humanity is has been known. No one can contend with someone who is stronger. Basically just solidifying this destiny type theme that we see throughout Star Wars. It's weird being the host person, Jordan.
I know.
It's different. Yeah, so my first notice within Star Wars being this constant theme of Yoda says it, Qui-Gon says it, Ben Kenobi says it later. Just this idea of people's destiny being written in stone, ready to go. Yeah, that's one of the themes that I have a lot of themes I can go off of, but I don't really want to take everyone's opportunity.
Oh, yes, you do.
Can I add something?
Yes, you can.
Wonderful. Thank you for letting me jump in, Liv. Great to be here. Been a long time fan. First time on the show. A little nervous.
I love you.
No, I really like what you said about destiny. It reminds me a lot of the Journal of the Wills, and where they talk a lot about the prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about that is there are so many, interpretations and iterations of the Bible itself. People can read it in different ways and take away different things, especially the prophecies that you read in there. And Yoda even says in Attack of the Clones, we have this prophecy of the chosen one, and it could be misread, and we could have been misinterpreting it this entire time. So I just wanted to come in there with that, and I just thought it was really interesting.
David, you took mine. Thanks so much.
My bad.
Good. Feed it to the hate.
We don't encourage that here. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I do have a whole theme on dark side, so
yes,
we're going to talk about it.
You going to say something, G?
I had something, but I've lost it in that last little bit back and forth.
Of me saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Do you want me to go so you can think?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to piggyback off of what David said, because he stole it, of just the prophesying, and the fact that I do like the fact that Star Wars uses that term specifically, that there's a prophecy, and interpreting that, because if you go back and you look through the Bible, that's the original, point in history where we see prophesying regularly. And so I don't know Star Wars as well as David and Olivia, obviously, but I do like the fact that they use something that at its core was used back in biblical times regularly as a source of communication from God. And so I like that. Did you think of yours, G?
I actually did.
Yay! Go.
I was going to say I like the whole idea of, in relations with the Bible, temptation of going to the dark side.
Ooh.
With Anakin, it was the temptation of going to the dark side to save Padme.
Mm-hmm.
With Vader tempting Luke, it was, we can rule the galaxy together as father and son. And there's plenty of other examples in there. Those are just the first two that came in mind. But just things that just happen in your daily life that tempt you. Whether that can be from getting angry at somebody that cuts you off in traffic, or being upset that somebody chose to end somebody else's life.
Because we get offended by that here.
Yes, we do.
All right, Caroline, what about you?
So here's the thing. Star Wars confuses me. I know I'm hearing horrified Victorian gasps from inside of David and Olivia. It doesn't help that my father was a lifelong fan, and frequently took me to the new movies that came out, and I just sort of went along with the ride and was like, I really don't get it. And the thing is, what I want to address, what I want to put Olivia and David in the hot seat for, is later on our outline of events today, because we could go on and on and on about Star Wars forever. So we're going to wait until a certain part, and then I am going to jump in, because I feel like we need to take some time with my general question. Well, it's not general, it's a question, all right.
Would it make you feel better if we talked about Trek?
No.
I know nothing about Trek.
Okay, Trek.
No, this has nothing to do with Trek. I figured Trek out.
I don't like the idea of being put in the hot seat. I put other people in the hot seat.
Get used to it.
Do unto others
Well, I
as
have
have
another
done unto
one.
you.
Hey,
I have another one.
go for it.
If we're moving on. My personal favorite theme throughout the entire Star Wars saga is the theme of redemption. I just want to point that out for a minute, because one of the things that I think is made very clear through Star Wars and also made very clear through the Bible is no one's too far gone in evil or in sin or in the dark side to be redeemed. We see it with Vader, we see it with Kylo Ren. We see Kylo Ren constantly conflicted by his choices and bouncing back and forth with Rey, but we see a huge redemption story with Vader. We get to see his walk through the Jedi Order, and then his fall, and then his choices that defeat the demons that have kind of consumed him throughout his time as a Sith Lord, being the death of Padme, being the killing of younglings. I mean, I can go on and on, but it's that really cool story of redemption that we see from 1 through 6 with Vader. That is just like, for me, it's just one of my absolute favorite themes throughout. And I think it closely connects to Luke 15:11-32, which is the story of the prodigal son, being that Anakin has this redemption, this comeback, and he's not neglected. Luke doesn't look at him and be like, oh, well, you messed up. Sorry, Dad. Hate ya. You can blow up. But it's almost in this reverse where Vader is Luke's father, but Luke is looking at him and saying, you are still my dad. He still tries to save him. He embraces him and brings him along with him onto the ship, not leaving him behind, giving him all the riches that he could possibly get, and also giving him a proper burial, essentially. Because we see most Jedis getting burned in their burials, and he gets a proper Jedi burial. It's very prodigal son-like, but in this case, prodigal father. I am your father.
Liv, you're not my father.
Thank God.
No, I'm not your father. I'm a girl.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness she's a girl. Or thank
You're telling me.
Yes. No, Liv, I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that, and as well as what John said about temptation. I also think that it's interesting that throughout the whole series of Star Wars is that the temptations, John, like you were saying, really piggyback off of the temptations that Satan tempted Jesus with, which is of power and of the people, and the very basic things. And then Liv, like you were saying, the fact that these people, Vader, a good example, that he does fall because he wants that power in order to save somebody, but it comes down to power, and he is able to be redeemed. So I do think that that's interesting, that really the basic temptations are those that Jesus were tempted with by Satan. Liv?
Yes, can you repeat that? Sorry.
What, that whole thing?
No, just the last part.
No, just the fact that it's at the very, very core throughout Star Wars. All the temptations are of power or for just the basic needs, like Jesus was tempted with by Satan.
Yeah. Sorry, I was clarifying something up over on my end and needed to get it taken care of. Yeah, I also love that theme of temptation and overcoming temptation. But we also, like you're saying, we also get to really see that depth of what happens when you fall into temptation
Yep.
through Star Wars. It's really dope. David has his physical hand raised.
Yes, David.
I also appreciate this concept of the temptations throughout this entire saga, and most of the time, what it really does is it capitalizes on the fear that the character is currently experiencing: fear of being abandoned, fear that they're going to be losing their friends, fear of what have you. And one thing that I really like, speaking of fear, is that Star Wars draws a direct line from fear, not anger, as a path to the dark side. So it goes from fear to the dark side, and anger is along the way. And I'm somebody that's always sort of subscribed to the notion that anger is not really one of the core emotions. And this is just my own personal thing. I see it as a secondary emotion and a response to that fear or sadness. And what these temptations do in Star Wars is they capitalize on that core emotion, that fear. When Luke is on the Death Star, he's seeing his friends getting attacked and they're losing that battle. And Sidious is looking at him saying, I can make this all go away. Just join me. And Luke is heavily considering it because he doesn't want to see his friends die. He's got his besties out there. And he does not succumb to that temptation. Whereas someone like Anakin in the prequel trilogy is terrified of being alone and being by himself, losing Padme. This is an individual that has experienced so much loss and so much tragedy. And Palpatine straight up capitalizes that in a big way. And it, over a number of years, becoming this father figure to him and really getting under his skin and getting to know what this Jedi fears the most so that he can leverage that to get him to join the dark side.
Yeah, and I mean, you can even look deeper into that. And I know we're mostly talking about the movies and kind of going off of the canon section of Star Wars. But if you look at it, Rey's tempted through Kylo Ren, knowing that, she's sitting there like, I'm all by myself. I don't really have anybody. She's experienced time with a little bit of time with Luke, but she really doesn't have that clear guidance the same way Luke did, the same way Anakin did, the same way all the Jedi before her really had that. So she's, experiencing that temptation. But if you want to go a little deeper, let me take a second. Ahsoka's also given that handout through fear. She's fearful of what she knows is potentially going to happen and almost takes that offering of I will help you, we'll destroy this, we'll change the course of history and future, follow me, and she denies it. And if you want to hear more about that, you can listen at Pizza and Parsecs. We did a whole thing on the Clone Wars Siege of Mandalore episode where we deep dive into that, but that's okay.
Nice plug, babe.
Very seamless transition for Olivia.
I try. Anyone else have any fun themes that they want to share?
Johnny?
The only thing I can come up with is not really a great one, but it's the whole birth of Anakin compared to the birth of Christ, of conceived without a father, where Christ was conceived of the Spirit, Anakin was conceived of the Force.
Yes.
But that's about where that whole that whole theme kind of falls apart after that.
Well, I mean, I think there's some similarities in character theme building that makes that plug-in really clear. So I don't think you're far-fetched. We actually we have a great deal of group text stuff that we got to talk about as well, and that's one of the things that was in our group text, which I'm really excited about. But I don't think it's, one of our listeners was like, asking how if it was a far-fetched comparison, and I was like, no, I don't think that's a far-fetched.
No, and it wasn't supposed to be. I don't think when it was put in there that it was supposed to be a far-fetched comparison. I think it was very intentionally put in there because the fact that it is it's not like, I mean, it's just something that doesn't happen. You have to have a higher force to make that happen. And obviously in Star Wars case, the higher force is the Force and the Mandalorians, but the other, not the Mandalorian, yeah, not. Well, she just said it. That's why it's in my head. What's it called? My brain's short.
Metachlorians.
Metachlorians. Thank you. But obviously in our life, that's Christ and the Father. So I don't think that was ever intended supposed to be far fetched that comparison be made at all.
And of course, he was also somebody of prophecy, somebody that prophesied about to make the world right again.
Absolutely.
So there are comparisons there. I just don't think the character, how it played, Christ never fell to the dark side. That's all I'm going to say to that.
So I think the comparison actually goes a little bit deeper than that. So yes, we are dealing with, the virgin birth, so to speak. But also, Anakin was a prodigy, right? I mean, he was a prodigy when it came to things like pod racing. He was an outstanding mechanic. And this is akin to Jesus and his experience with the scholars at the temple. Like, he was a prodigy in that aspect. Also, if you want to take a look at the widen the lens of that, you can almost see Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan as wise men as well.
Oh, I would agree with that.
Of course.
I think that's a good comparison to that.
Maybe in the more Ben-Hur sense of the way the wise men acted, but I can understand that.
I literally was about to say, Caroline, I know this is all confusing you, but do you have anything to add? So that was good timing.
I mean, that, and don't just say this is literally all confusing me. It's just, I think you'll understand the main source of my kind of brain disconnect once we get to theology specifically within Star Wars in our outline.
So did you say you had a question for Pizza and Parsecs, or are you just
I have a question, but I'm waiting for, if we feel like we are all ready to address it, because I feel like this could take a little while.
Liv, are you okay with her asking y'all a question?
Dave has one more point he wants to address.
Fine, we'll let the guest speak.
Dave, don't pay attention to her. Just go ahead and speak.
Actually, I have 2 more points. Sorry. So number 1 is this theme of being the student of the unknown. Like we talked a little bit earlier about seeking to know God. And that's what the entire Jedi Order is kind of formulated to do, seeking to know and understand the will of the Force. So there's that one little comparison there. And I also want to touch on this theme of sacrifice as well. And the 3 big ones that I want to talk about are with Rogue One, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. So with Rogue One, you have 2 big pieces to sacrifice there. You have Jyn Erso. I'm speaking of Jyn Erso, she has this entire sort of redemptive transition from being this selfish, self-preserving individual to someone who is selfless, becoming this beacon of hope for the galaxy and responsible for getting this super important message out there to help save the galaxy. And then you have Chirrut, and Chirrut is the guy that was the absolute one of the coolest characters in that movie. I'm one with the Force and the Force is with me. He was a guardian of the Wills, which the Wills really heavily relies on a lot of Lucas's early work, like the early material responsible for Star Wars. But these Wills were sort of intended to be these Bible kind of texts that are a collection of stories that the Jedi would study. And that's kind of where the Wills kind of came from. But sadly, we didn't get a lot of the Wills in the canonical Star Wars universe. So with The Last Jedi, Rhodes has a really good line in there about fighting what we hate versus saving what we love. A lot of people think that's like super cheesy, but I think it's heartwarming. That really captures the spirit of Star Wars for me. Is you have these individuals and characters that are really fighting for what they believe in and trying to save what they love. And there are instances throughout the entire saga where people lay down their weapons to sacrifice themselves so that their legacy can live on. You think of Obi-Wan Kenobi, he chooses not to fight Vader, and in that single act, he becomes more powerful than he could ever possibly imagine. At any rate, one of my favorite points in the sequel trilogy, I love The Last Jedi. One of my favorite points with it is this concept of failure. And Yoda has this line talking to Luke, and Luke's feeling like an absolute failure for what happened with Kylo, super bummed out about it. And then Force Ghost Yoda comes in and it has this line about the greatest teacher failure is. And this really articulates that failures are growth opportunities to become closer to God. And we must continue to move on in service of God, or in the Force in this case, continue to being a servant of the Force, which is exactly what Luke ended up doing. And in doing so, he also sacrificed himself there. And then finally, you have the mother sacrifice. You have Carrie Fisher, R.I.P.
You crossed yourself. I love that.
Did you really, David?
R.I.P.
I did.
I really did.
It's like Mark Hamill said,
Loved that.
I
That was
look to the
amazing.
heavens and I see Carrie Fisher's face in the cloud. She has a Diet Coke in one hand, and in the other she flips me off.
Oh,
Gotta
man.
love it.
But with Leia's dying breath, she reached out in the Force to her son in an effort to try to, she sacrificed herself to give her son an opportunity to turn and come back towards the light. I mean, you talked about prodigal son, like that. This is that opportunity for Kylo, and then Kylo also obviously has his own sacrifice later on in the movie as well, taking a page out of his mother's book. It's beautiful. But those are my last 2 points for my last points for general themes. I'm not going to put a number on it at this point.
David.
Well, I think it's really
Go ahead, Liv.
it's really good because you were talking about. I just lost what I was gonna say, and now I'm really frustrated with myself.
Do you want me to say what I was going to say first? So you can think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, David, there was a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but you were talking about failure and learning from it. And I heard this from somebody that said, if you fail or make a mistake and don't learn from it, it's just an experience. But if you learn from it, it's tuition. And I thought that was a great line to say about, failing and making mistakes, is that for sure, and this is just in general, if we learn from it, that's sometimes better than going to a school and having to learn certain things. Failure is learning.
Yeah, so tuition is too high in this world. Yes, I'd like to make a complaint to the board of directors.
I was going to make a Thomas Edison quote of, I failed my way to success.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think one of the things that as Christians we have to come to terms with is we are going to constantly fail.
Absolutely.
And this is, Star Wars has that great representation of constant failures for success. We see it over and over again. Like, as much as I love Qui-Gon, he failed in Duel of the Fates. He failed to defeat Maul and was killed. But that, and again, this is going off of, going away from movie a little bit and into show, but because of his failure, he was able to then later educate Yoda further, and he was able to help Yoda in his success as a Jedi, which brought more and more success, leading him to be able to be greater than he could have ever been alive while he was dead. We see that failure with Anakin. We see that failure with Padme. We see that failure with Obi-Wan. Every single one of these individuals fail at some point. We see the failures that the Jedi Order itself had throughout 1, 2, and 3 because they failed to see the corrupt, government that was what Palpatine was controlling. And that I'm going to take that deeper into our, theology and group text, because we have a good deal of conversation about that to have later. But there was so much failure within the Jedi Order, this thing that was held to such high esteem that people looked to and saw hope, and they saw success, and they saw, glory, and they saw selflessness, but in fact they were very, very much failing at their original quest, which was to help and serve others, not help and serve the government. And we see that failure in that rise to success throughout 4, 5, 6, and then again in 7, 8, 9. I can be smart sometimes.
Testify.
Testify. Can I get an amen?
No.
I had one more theme. I know this is like bouncing a little bit, but I had one more theme that I forgot to talk about, and that was the dark side itself. The theme of evil being an all-consuming, all, tempting being. And comparing that real quick, being dark side equaling sin, and, more so active living sin than the inactive kind of subconscious sin that we all experience. But that fact that people choose to live in active sin in certain aspects of their lives, and that dark side being that living sin that they choose, opposed to we just are sinful beings. And I wanted to compare it really quick. Adam and Eve were separated from God through disobedience, and then the Sith are also separated by the Jedi Order because of disobedience, because they've disobeyed the ground rules or the bylaws of the Jedi Order, being to be good guys, essentially. But I wanted to throw that out there because that is a constant theme that we see through all 9 movies, 11 if you want to count Rogue One and Solo in there as well. But we see this constant development and conversation of the dark side, and we can easily see that theme as sin throughout Star Wars. Just want to throw that out there.
You can throw it all you want.
Yay, I get to nerd out. I love nerding
I know
out.
you do.
Okay, so now that we've talked about general themes, I would love to dive a little bit deeper into the theology behind Star Wars. And Dave has actually asked if he can go first in this one.
Jeez, David.
And this is a very general thing. It's not even something specific to the movies or anything. So I want to just take a moment and talk a little bit about George Lucas and the creation of these films and the mythology, the mythos behind this galaxy far, far away. So George was an advocate for theology in general, not necessarily for any particular religion, though. He wanted to encourage spirituality and curiosity, a thirst for understanding. And for Christians, this is a quest to know God. So I want to take a moment and read 2 quick quotes for you. I put the Force in the movies in order to try to awaken a certain kind of spirituality in young people, more a belief in God than a belief in any particular religious system. And then he goes on to talk about how a lot of these stories can sort of apply to even other religions as well. So he said that, talking about how there are people that are relating these stories specifically to the Bible and relate stories to the Quran and the Torah and things. And it's so like it's a tool that can be used to make old stories new and to relate to younger people. That's what the whole point was. So I don't think that George had Christianity at the forefront of his mind when creating this, I think that he did have this idea and spirituality of all of these different systems, because there's all of these different religions involved with this. Like, I mean, even something like Buddhism is heavily prevalent within the Jedi Order as well.
That's where I've always viewed it more as I always thought Star Wars was more of an Eastern religious thing with yin yang, not necessarily a Western of Christianity.
Why are you guys jumping on all the points I was going to ask
Because
about?
we read your mind.
Because this is some of the stuff I brought up with Christ in the mainstream media.
Just go back and listen to that.
No, I have some specifics that I would like to ask about, but clearly we're getting there, so this is a good thing.
Sorry for cutting you off, Dave.
But you're good. But I think that's what I love so much about this, is that when we see Star Wars, we see these Christian themes. And when somebody else sees Star Wars, they might see themes from a different religion.
Mm-hmm.
It's all encompassing. And what I love about it is that it encourages that curiosity to continue to deepen your own spiritual understanding and your spiritual growth. And I think that's really beautiful.
It is very beautiful.
Yes.
Since
I loved that. That was very good. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I took it a little bit of a different route as far as the theology goes. There's one specific point within the theology of Star Wars that I always go back to, and that's the relationship between the Force and the Holy Spirit. And I have a great deal of notes on that. So if you guys are okay with me just jumping into that really quick, I will
go
do
live,
that.
go. Maybe.
Okay. All right. So the Force is made up of living things. That is stated by the Jedi throughout all the episodes of Star Wars. The Holy Spirit is a person residing within living beings. So we have a Holy Spirit that is pure and good, while the Force is capable of being manipulated by evil. So those are some of the similarities and differences that they have really quick. But I'm going to break down the Force and its kind of core statutes and give you biblical standing behind them really quick. So the Force is...
I'm literally going to have nothing to say at this point because you're just...
I'm sorry. So
all right, continue.
the Force is an energy field created by living things. The Holy Spirit has always existed, Hebrews 9:14. So the Force surrounds and penetrates us. The Holy Spirit is omnipresent, Psalms 139, 7 through 10. And of course, the scripture is modified for, like, it's just major points. The Force binds the galaxy together, while the Holy Spirit holds all together. That's Colossians 1:17. You must learn the ways of the Force, and then you can learn... I should have made lines. You can learn to walk according to the Spirit. That's Romans 8, 4 through 5. Then you have the power of the Force, and then you have life from death, being Romans 8:11, showing that the Holy Spirit was going through Christ and raising people from the dead. It sustained Jesus while he was in the valley of the death, Luke 4:1. You have how much power it actually holds, which is Acts 1:8, and Acts 2:1 through 4. So there are so many comparisons. And then the last one is the Force directly flows through us, and the Holy Spirit actually directs us by flowing through us, Acts 20:22. So there are these like core statutes of the Force that you can easily through scripture find as correlations so quickly. And I think that's one of the big things that I loved so much about Star Wars is I saw a physical representation of what the Holy Spirit like can do when you're that in tuned. And then going even slightly further, Force abilities are real. They may be legends in certain aspects, but there are some within the canon that I absolutely love, being control, sense, and alter. So we see a lot of times in the legends games and stuff that you can actually use Force sense to see through walls. You can see, you can use Force alter to manipulate the mind. You can use control to move things forward and back, side to side. We see that often when they pull the droids in. But the Holy Spirit allows us to connect with it so deeply that we can utilize its giftings, like we've talked about in our spiritual gift podcast, through wisdom, knowledge, healing, prophecy, discernment, speaking in tongues, and translation of tongues. So there are these manipulations that the Force has that easily correlate to what the Holy Spirit is. And that's the end of my awesome fun rant, because I love that theology behind the Force. Even if it was indirect or direct from the Bible, it's still, like you were saying, that's what resonated with me, because you can see that underlying Christianity play through Star Wars.
And some of them even have sort of that one-to-one relationship. And I can't remember off the top of my head whose is whose, but you have Obi-Wan and then you have Mace Windu. And it's either Mace Windu has discernment or Obi-Wan has discernment. I can never remember which, but Obi-Wan kind of can see how things are. He has like a lot of perspective, and then Mace Windu can kind of see everything, how they're fitting to how it fits together.
Right.
And they were both very, very close to each other for me, so I can't really remember which one of them is discernment. But the Jedi Order, like everybody has sort of that concept of spiritual gifts. One of that is also sticking out for me is Quinlan Voss. He has this Jedi spiritual gift to be able to see and experience something based on an object. So he can touch an object and see what happened in the past. So it's a little more mystical in the Jedi Star Wars world, but it's very similar.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Johnny G?
Well,
John?
see, like I said earlier, I've always viewed it more from an Eastern mindset, and that's weird because I did not grow up in that type of culture whatsoever. But I see a lot more of the yin yang with it, where when the light side of the Force gets too overbearing, you get Jedi that fall. When the dark side of the Force becomes more overbearing, you get people within the Sith or people that rise up. And I get that a little bit more from the Knights of the Old Republic games, given. But with that, the light side was overbearing in episodes 1, 2, and 3. Anakin falls. And kind of resets everything. 4, 5, and 6, dark side taking more of an overbearing path. Luke rises up, and Anakin also converts back. So, I see that, and throughout the entire series, you hear the Force is the guiding factor. And the Force being the entity throughout the entire thing, which is much more of a pantheistic type of religion in my mindset. And that's where I've always kind of thought of Star Wars. Now, I have seen, like I made the connection earlier with Anakin and Christ, and I have seen these Christian stories in it, but I've always had that overall thinking of, oh, it's an Eastern story in my head. So that's where I've always had fun of listening to the overall arching thing being Christ.
I'm actually going to defer my portion because Caroline
is in Morse code,
is like crazy raising her hand, and I know that she is like getting desperate because we're taking everything that she was going to talk about, so I'm going to defer mine to her.
I live! Finally!
Wrong Disney movie.
Finally! Okay. So, that is basically my main thing as well, John. So, here is where my conflict comes from. My father was obsessed with Star Wars, and he was also very interested in Eastern religions. And so here I am, a dopey little kid who is much more into fantasy than sci-fi at the time. And he's trying to explain these concepts to me that to me is like, no comprendo. And so it didn't get better when I got older, and things didn't seem to become linear as far as typical Americanized Christian theology goes. Which, Liv, for the record, I'm very wait, hold on. Who pointed out that Lucas said that it was not he wanted it.
That would be me.
Okay, David, thank you. You pointed out what Lucas said about he wanted it to be spiritual but not necessarily be specific, which already makes things make a lot more sense. But because I like knowing the canon of things, this is where my confusion comes from. And it could just be that because there are so many different writers in the expanded universe, that this is where the sort of perspective shift comes in, and I'm just going to have to accept that there is no true canon to the Star Wars, just like there is no true canon to the ancient Greek pantheon or to the Norse pantheon, because of shifting beliefs in different places and all of that jazz. And that's how we weave a tapestry of a whole thing with multiple perspectives. So here is my beef: balancing the Force. I know y'all already brought this up, but I still don't get it. In light of a certain episode in Clone Wars, don't remember what it's called, but Anakin and co. land on a planet with just 3 people on it. An ancient father with 2 children, a daughter who fell into this vat of like light side juice, and a son who fell into a vat of dark side juice. And they're constantly battling it out, which in my mind is like, look, I don't get how, if the light side's supposed to be good and the dark side's supposed to be bad, why is it a bad thing that the daughter is trying to beat the ever-living crap out of her brother and win? Like, this is the whole Taoism thing, which to me it's like you can't have your cake and eat it too, to me, in that you're going to either go full Christian or you're going to go full Taoist, which I feel like Disney would have made a greater statement on if they had made Rey a gray Jedi by the end of movie 9. And it's just, to me, it's slightly irreconcilable, but y'all probably get it better than I do, so that's why it's like I said, Force balance, no comprendo.
Yes, hold on. We're collecting our thoughts really quick.
No, you cannot do that. Talk now.
You're talking about the Mortis arc, when they go to Mortis and they meet the son, the daughter, and the father, right?
Yes. Yes.
One,
Like I said, I didn't remember it. All I remember is that there were pools of like liquid force, and the father was like, "Don't go near them or else bad things will happen." And then bad things happen, and Anakin and company had to deal with it, which also to me brought up, wow, this is directly dealing with like morality and the force. Okay. This makes me even more confused.
let me just double check real quick that that's the arc I'm thinking of. Do they have
I'm
do
pretty
they have like
sure
dragon things in there?
I remember the father had a white beard and the daughter had really long, pretty hair, and the son looked like he stepped out of a volcano. Like,
Yeah.
kind of like Anakin when,
Did you order the
Obi-Wan
original recipe or
almost
extra
killed him.
crispy?
Yeah, you're right. That's weird.
Shut up! Oh my word!
So I know Dave probably has a whole lot he wants to share on this.
No pressure.
Good.
I mean, you're over here slightly reacting. So if you're okay, I want to go ahead and jump in really quick on a couple of notes just to kind of swing into it. One, I'm not saying this in a correction type of way. I'm just saying this in a perspective slash being someone who is I've watched Star Wars for my whole life, but I like to say that I'm a renewed Star Wars fan.
I'm newly baptized.
Exactly.
I'm newly
Because-
baptized with the Star Wars Force.
I, since meeting Dave and Dave and I finding that love of nerd culture together and kind of growing that nerd culture with each other through Pizza and Parsecs and just our normal day-to-day goofiness, I've grown my Star Wars love and I've expanded my Star Wars. And I do want to say, technically, Star Wars is canon. I just want to go ahead and point that out. Technically, it is in canon. There is legends that are, no longer quote unquote within that canon, but technically there is a canon. But I do.
Well. Oh, okay. See, I was about to say, wait, hold on. Are we talking about the expanded universe before Disney came and was like, no, we're going to get rid of the old expanded universe and create our own expanded universe,
Right.
and how both of those are technically canon, or rather, one of them is the fans that are angry that their canon was destroyed by Disney, or
They classified those as legends. Am I correct, Dave?
Oh, okay.
So the expanded
And that's how it all stays canon.
Yeah, so the expanded universe that Disney kind of turned a little bit of a nose to said, okay, that's Legends. However, Disney has created an episode where one of their main characters in the Clone Wars turns and says, there is still some truth to Legends. So that's a little hat nod from Disney saying there's still a lot of truth within the Legends that has been built prior to. The other thing I want to say really quick, if we look at the movies alone, we do not see a single Jedi, minus Anakin, because at that point he had already turned. We do not see a single, I mean, he hadn't turned quite yet since he killed Dooku, but he was already on that path of questioning and unstable life. We don't really see a Jedi ever actually kill a Sith. Not that I can recall. If anything, Jedis have disabled, disarmed, or captured Sith and don't usually execute them. It's most of the time it's questioning and imprisonment.
If you're talking about movies
I just want to put that
alone,
out there.
would you count Obi-Wan killing
Maul?
Maul? Because yes, we know later that Maul actually isn't dead, but I'm talking about if you're looking at he was. But
he was resurrected by the fans.
I'm talking about movies alone. Everybody assumes that Maul is dead.
Well,
that's
because
true.
Solo he comes back, so he's back in Solo. So we are given that conclusion.
But the intent was to kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think his intentions to kill him was maybe slightly out of anger, and there's probably that like turmoil going on. But I do have to say, yes, his intention was to kill, but he still wasn't dead. He actually dismembered him, so he falls in that category.
And it could be
Oh, he just
was just a flesh
him.
wound.
Oh, is that all?
Come here on.
Just a flesh wound.
And to me, in Return of the Jedi, Luke had that when he goes full rage on Vader. I don't see a world where he had not gone into that moment, not intending to kill his father.
Yeah.
It wasn't until he had that moment of enlightenment where he's kind of drew the parallel between him and his father, that there were a lot. They're one of the same, basically. That's his father.
Yeah.
And then he chooses to throw down his weapon and said, I'm going to love my dad.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's a lot of instances where I think that the Jedi go into it fully expecting that there may be death at the end of it.
I mean, yeah, and I don't discredit that outlook of it. I think there's many times where Jedi go into things and think there's a high probability that someone's going to die, but I don't think their true intention is I'm gonna just
if you're going off of that where it's like I'm going into this fight just to deal with this Sith, yes, I understand what you're saying. If you're simply looking at it from that perspective and not from a perspective of I hate this person, they must die, then yeah, I understand what you're saying. You really don't, with the exception of Anakin, you don't see that.
Right.
Nearly saw that from Mace, though.
Whew. Yes. But there's reasons behind that. We can get into that in a minute. Do you want to take on Caroline's hot seat?
I had so much at the time, and then we went on the tangent.
David, welcome to Call to the Table. This is what we do. We go on tangents.
Answer me, dang it. I was sitting on that for like 45 minutes. Give me a break.
All right, David, you want to answer Caroline's question?
Caroline, real quick, since we went on that tangent, I want to make sure I get to all your questions. Can you repeat some of them, please? I apologize. I should have written them down.
No. It's okay. Hey guys, Caroline here with a huge shout out to all first responders all over the world. Whether you're in a hospital or urgent care center or running deliveries for stores and restaurants, Call to the Table salutes your bravery and heroism in this crazy time of need. For those of us in different situations, let's continue to do our part by social distancing and sanitizing so we can beat this thing into the ground as one united force. That's all I've got for today. Bye, guys! I'm trying to figure out the easiest way to make this as tight as possible. So, I do not understand balancing the Force and how that intersects with our general Christian theology, and I should say general Americanized Christian theology that we see in Hollywood, particularly now that Disney has the reins. And I know that in America, movies tend to not be able to escape this moral bias. And even though Lucas wanted to include spirituality in his movie, it was very easy for many people to draw Christian parallels in that way. And so to me, I want to understand what is the best way in which to view the theology slash morality of Star Wars. Because, like I said, to me, it is an uneven blend of Taoism and Christianity. And the times when they have tried to explain it, I don't feel like they did a good job explaining, because I was still left confused, particularly about that Clone Wars episode that the YouTube algorithms recommended to me, and I clicked on it because I thought the Light Force lady was pretty. So, I will click on something if it has pretty animation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I think talking about balance, right? There's this is to this day, this is still a very not a hot button issue, but there's a lot of discussion still around this idea of what is balance. Like, is balance equal parts light, equal parts dark? Is balance a complete absence of dark? There has not been an exact canonical explicit thing that has come out that says this is what it truly means to be balanced.
Perfect. Thank you. That is literally almost all I needed to know, but you may continue.
But what's cool about it is people can have their own theories. And for me, the balance aspect does kind of, I mean, I guess it would kind of fall into this Taoistic sort of thing that you talked about there, where it's not necessarily a complete absence of darkness. It's a, well, let me back up. You asked a really, really, really deep question, by the way.
Of course I did. Of course I did. I was sitting on this going, oh, this is going to take up like
Liv is
a
not
third of
asking
the
tough
episode.
questions, it's
Haha,
Caroline.
oh well.
Give me that hot seat. I usually do that.
So I see the this concept of balance of the Force as an absence of a perversion of the Force, a corruption of the Force, which is essentially what the dark side is. And that's just me. I mean, like so many things, it's all up to personal preference. That's just how I choose to view it. It's also kind of a flavor of the week thing. I sometimes watch a movie and I'm like, okay, I'm on this side of believing what balance is, and you happen to catch me on a day where I think that the balance of the Force is an absence of that darkness, or controlling, or having that darkness control it. Because that's essentially what the dark side is it's a perversion and corruption of the Force, and you actually get physical manifestations of that corruption with things like Force lightning, which is corrupting the Force, like an actual manifestation of that. I mean, we saw that with Rey in Rise of Skywalker. She had all of this hate in her in that moment. And as she was reaching out in the Force to try to save Chewie, she was consumed, to use your word, Liv. Loved that. But she was consumed by that hate and that fear. I mean, which of course stems from fear,
Mm-hmm.
but resulting in that corruption of the Force, which obviously terrified her even more. But all that to say, there's no like canonical
and I've
material
always
out there that
viewed
says
it more
this is
as
what it means to be
an
balanced.
absence of extremes of light or dark for being at balance.
So like a scale, like
That'd be perfect balance, but I'm talking about just a general
50%
balance,
on one side, 50%
as long as
on
it's
the
not
other.
like 90-10.
There's no like major outliers.
Yeah.
Basically.
Basically, both sides have at least a fair amount of skin in the game.
See, I see the Force as inherently good, though, and this Force is inherently pure in itself, and there are aspects to it that can
But
be corrupted very
is
easily.
it that they are? Is
and
it
that's
how
where I
they
think the
view
dark
it,
side
or is
comes
it
in.
what they are doing with it? Because how Anakin turns, which is trying to wanting to use the midichlorians to save Padme. If you look at that from as a good or bad, that sounds like a good thing. Now, obviously, turning his back and the process of that is not good. But at the very, very core, wanting to use the Force to save a life is good.
So now we're kind of getting into the Jedi Code a little bit. But to me, this is all very. A lot of this is really ambiguous, I guess you could say. The Jedi Code is less ambiguous, but when you're talking about the motivation behind something, the way that I experience the light side of the Force, like the Jedi way, is they are servants of the will of the Force. Dark side users seek to use the Force in order to gain power for themselves. They use it for this inherently selfish act. And Anakin is attempting to use it as a selfish act. Not I don't think he was necessarily just trying to save a life for just out of goodwill in that moment for Padme. I see it as him he's being possessive. Like that's coming from a possessive.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying, like from that
possessive side of
from
himself.
that sense, if
Does that
you
make
had,
sense?
because and y'all know more than I do, but from what I know of it, from the little I've heard, there is not a instance where, going with like what you said, David, with the being the servant, there's not an instance where the Force sits there and is like, okay, I want you to go, and this person needs healing. That's not typically seen, and that just may be how the Jedi have been, like, are serving. I don't know. Again, I'm deferring that more to y'all, but to me, and I'm not saying the Jedi is bad, but I'm saying to me the Jedi almost sit there and act as if, like, yes, they're servants of the Force. Yes, they are serving for the good of the Force. But if you have a trusted servant, they can sometimes sit there and make decisions on behalf of the master or whatever that maybe the master wouldn't make. And so from that instance, are they sitting there and saying, yes, we're servants of the Force, but we're limiting how much we're gonna serve?
So Liv has a point and I have a point. I have one really quick point.
My hand is raised.
I want to make sure
Okay.
we're making this distinction between the Jedi Order and the Jedi Way.
Okay.
I see the Jedi Order as a church, and the Jedi Way and the actual religious aspect of it, the practices, the teachings, that as a completely separate entity. In an ideal world, much like Christianity and the church, those two should intersect very closely with one another. They should be
Right.
one and the same. But as we see in the prequels, that's not the case. There's that. There's a clear, difference between those two, and in the what I liked about the prequels is it's this cautionary tale of. Let me start that over. What I liked about the prequels was it was this
Yeah.
cautionary tale of the separation of church and the state and the Jedi's involvement in the politics, and they got heavily involved in the Senate, and then they became very hyper aware of the public's opinion of them, to the point where this shroud of the dark side was so easily masked over them that they began to even do the will of the dark side and not even know it. Taking on this entire clone army, which is completely against
Yeah.
their practices and teachings. They are keepers of the peace, not soldiers. And they ended up being generals and commanders in the Republic Army. So when it's sometimes tough to think about the Jedi and Jedi Order as two separate entities, but I think it's an important distinction to make, because the Jedi Order, easily corruptible, much like churches are.
Mm-hmm.
That men are fallible and the churches are run by men, and I would love to think that the church and religion would intertwine perfectly with one another, but sometimes they don't.
Right.
So essentially, the first 3 movies are just the Crusades.
Well, and if you
Like, no, that helps me get it. I'm. Thank you.
yeah, and I mean, you can also look at it a little bit differently. Like the way I look at the Jedi Order and the Jedi Way is religion versus relationship. We have a religion that kind of gives us that baseline, that guide, the Bible, all of these aspects, but then you have the relationship with it, which is the direct connection and the one-on-one relationship that you have with God. And that's how I see those two. So very similarly to church and religion, I see them as religion and relationship.
Liv, I think you just came up with another topic we need to add to the list.
Probably. I talk about the differences between religion and relationship all the time because I have opinions.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that, because like you say that and I immediately think of two people. I think of Qui-Gon and I think of Ahsoka.
Yep.
See,
Yep.
I was going to bring up Qui-Gon.
Yeah, because I feel like Qui-Gon is the embodiment of a relationship with the Jedi way, in my opinion.
Yep.
And same with Ahsoka.
Servant to the will of the Force, not the Order.
Yep.
And by virtue of the Order, the Republic.
Yep. Which leads me to my comment on balance real quick, if that's okay.
Yep.
I think of balance of the Force as the healthy balance of free will and where we stand as far as God giving us free will, but also having to be obedient and walk in the way of the Lord as far as the guidance that he gives us. Because we can constantly talk about, what does free will mean? As Christians, like free will doesn't mean God says, oh, I want you to go to Houston, or oh, I want you to go here. It's the free will of obedience that takes me there. And so that healthy balance that I see within the balance of the Force would be finding that balance of free will but obedience on top of that. Not necessarily light to dark, but how can I utilize my obedience in partnership with the freedom that I have to utilize the powers that are vested into me by the Force? That's my conclusion to balance. That's my understanding. That's how I see it and kind of where I come from with it.
I like it.
Perspective. Thank y'all.
So, Liv, I know you're running more of the outline, but I'm looking at time, and I want to make sure we don't go too long. Do you want to go ahead and ask some of the group texts?
Yes, after Dave gives his last point, because he has one more point he'd like to make.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to close the loop. I mentioned the Jedi Code earlier.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think it's while on the surface it may seem very similar to Eastern religion, I think it's very similar to the kind of messages that we get in the Bible, and overall it establishes these moral standards and encourages us to seek to understand, in much the same way that we get these messages in the Bible and the Ten Commandments and things like that. So the Jedi Code is There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is only the force. So I kind of want to break this apart piece by piece to kind of walk through it a little bit, because once I do, I think it'll be a little bit easier to see how this, relates back to Christianity for me personally and what I see. So starting it from the top, you have there is no emotion, there's only peace. This teaches us that emotions are reactions to circumstances, and these emotions are transient and not the basis of action. And actions should be based on character, which should not waver. Your character and your beliefs and your values should not waver. And embrace emotion, but don't let it govern you, Caroline, much like Vulcans.
I mean, yes, but I don't know. It's a little different, of course. But and I understand that. Go on.
There is no ignorance, only knowledge. And to me, I read this and I think that, these are not all knowing people. What they are going for here is the mission of not knowing is the first step towards knowledge. Continuing that quest to seek to understand, to seek to know God. It's a continuing journey. There is no passion, there is only serenity. This is talking about that selfishness that I talked about before with Anakin and Padme, that selfishness and possession and that attachment. And this is the only piece of this where I think it kind of only applies in certain aspects of, mainstream religion. I see it as only applying to like the clergy,
Yeah.
Nuns and priests. But I think it has a place there nonetheless, because in that lack of attachment, you are fully indebted to, or not indebted to, you are fully committing yourself to the will of God. There is no chaos, only harmony. This is like, when there's chaos going on around you, when everything is beating you down, you're attempting to divine the purpose behind the chaos. Like, what is God's message behind this? Once again, seeking to understand, and or maybe even more importantly, having faith that God will reveal that purpose to you.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, there is no death, only the force. And I love this piece. I'm going to bring up a quote real quick from Luke. No one is ever really gone. You continue to live with those that you left behind in death. And for Jedi, there's a path beyond. It's a continuous journey. I mean, for them, they get to become Force ghosts now. That's pretty dope.
Force ghosts!
And much like, in Christianity, we have that concept of getting into heaven. Like that's a part of the journey is that's part of our spiritual journey right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I see, this core message behind what the Jedi Order is supposed to be, this Jedi code. I see that as, falling closely in line with the teachings and the messages that we get in the Bible.
Yeah. Caroline has her hand raised, but she's muted.
Wanted to say two things. Sorry, I just said that, and then Liv said that, and then I went, right. Okay. So, first, Jedi Code very much reminds me of the Air Monk Code from Avatar: The Last Airbender, so that definitely helps me understand it. And the second bit about Force Ghosts. Do we have any canon that says that they stay Force Ghosts forever?
I mean, the entire concept of Force Ghosts is you become one with the Force, which is timeless.
But okay, so here's my confusion.
Okay.
I found a comic online that was written by the same creator as Astro Boy, completely about the life of Buddha. And that thing opened my eyes to the main tenets of Buddhism and how they work exactly. One of which is that after anyone, animal, human, whatever, dies, their life, not their soul, their life returns to the cosmos. And Buddha ended up bringing this girl back to life, not by grabbing her soul, but by taking a little bit of that cosmos and putting it back into her. And that's kind of the way the afterlife worked in his Dark Materials and the whole dust thing. Just FYI, I absolutely hate that series for multiple reasons, but I found it interesting how dust and the Buddhist understanding of life fit together, and that the true goal for those who were in the underworld is like, look, we're made of dust. We want to return to dust. And so they've kind of opened up another hole to the other side of the underworld, and then everybody sort of floated off into the cosmos and was happy and whatever. So it's kind of like life force returning back to life without individuality. And I don't know if my dad said something or what, but I had this idea of they can't maintain the force ghost forever. They will eventually return to the force themselves as non-entities, just the force, just life. And so I wanted to know, am I right about that? Or is that another one of those, there are a multitude of theories, but we don't actually have like a straight up answer about that?
So, two
Have I shaken you to your core?
no. So,
Sorry.
two quick things. Not everybody it has become a force ghost.
Yeah.
Right, which is true, which is why I'm kind of like there's that point, yes.
It requires a very special type of training, which was initially found by Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon was able to figure out how to speak from the beyond to Yoda and give him the message to head off to these different planets and go on this entire fun little spiritual adventure in order to have this moment of, for lack of a better term, enlightenment, and to have that training to be able to become one with the Force. So it requires a very special type of training to achieve that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Well, that part it does, yes. And I guess the rest of it also goes well, I mean, since we have the Jedi code and all, there is no death, there is only the Force. What does that have to do with people who aren't able to be Force ghosts? Like, doesn't that mean they just sort of pass on and just become, a mindless life thing, whatever?
I think if you want to compare it to Christianity and the Christian faith, which is how I compare it, because the fourth force is it penetrates all living beings and it's made up of living beings. It's not just like selected to a certain groupage of, oh, you guys are good guys, you get to be Jedi. The Force is encompassing of all. We see Han Solo even kind of become one with the Force in a sense of belief and falling towards that walk of, oh, I see the good that this can bring, and even starts to believe within the Force. While not everyone can be Force ghosts, again, it's that extensive amount of training that they have to endure. It's the idea, again, in comparison to Christian faith, it's the idea of you go on, like your soul continues to live on while you leave your physical body behind. It's that you don't really ever die. In Christian belief, when you become one with the Lord and you opened up your heart and allowed him in, that is the beginning of your eternity. That is the first day of the rest of your eternity with the walk of the Lord, with your creator. The same kind of goes for the Force, and being that you're one with the Force, you've chosen it, you have walked through it, you have kind of become one with it, and you walk into an eternity just like Christians do with their beliefs. That's how I see it.
And
So, is there a canon afterlife then?
I don't know. I haven't read the books.
I mean,
Dave?
they. You mean like an actual book that's written from the perspective of somebody that's dead?
No, just like, is there a canon afterlife? Like, I mean, we already talked about. I mean, this is the way I'm seeing it. Essentially, Force ghosts are like we've talking about that reaching enlightenment kind of thing. And so they've essentially transformed themselves into a higher state, whereas everybody else, when they die, they become one with the Force. But what the heck does that mean? Does that mean that they maintain their individuality as souls? Does that mean that where do they go? What happens? Do they just sort of float around through space and go, "Oh yeah, this is chill. This is awesome." Like what's going on?
I mean, I absolutely do think that there is an afterlife. I mean, otherwise, Qui-Gon wouldn't have been able to,
Right.
train himself in the afterlife to be able to communicate.
Right.
Um, so everyone, becomes one with the Force in death. So you have that perspective there. In death, they become one with the Force. There's this other piece of that, though, where if that sort of metaphysical aspect doesn't work for you, there's also the first point that I made: no one's ever really gone. The echoes of your life will echo past your lifespan, essentially. So I die, that's going to have an impact on people still living it, or so I'd like to think. People remember. People remember the lesser half of Pizza and Parsecs.
Oh
May
my
he
God!
rest in peace. But I mean, there's that aspect too. So there's that teaching in there as well, because like the example that you said, the virtues that you held, those live on in the people that you left behind. And yeah, so I'll kind of leave it at that.
Yeah. I just wanted to know what was canon. That's it.
There's an afterlife.
Easy answer.
We're just not told much about it. We just know that it's there, but that's about it.
Yeah, you just have to have, I mean, much like Christianity, it requires faith.
Yeah. So we have some really exciting group text, group chat things that I want to kind of go about. The first one I want to talk about they all actually come from Twitter. Let me just say this. Our Twitter blew up. It was so exciting. I woke up and had a bunch of retweets and responses to just having Pizza and Parsecs on our show. So the first one comes from Cam Ray. So at Cam Ray. Hey Cam,
Hey, Cam.
how you doing? And it's not so much a question. I asked him what was one of his favorite themes because he was super excited to hear our show. And he said, a big theme for me is the conflict the Jedi ran into when they become intertwined with the Republic, letting dogma and politics get in the way of their true calling as perimeters of peace. This is similar to the Christ followers who become quote unquote religious, to the point of missing the simpler message of Jesus, which is just love God and love others. The Jedi become so focused on the order and all the rules, then some actually fled and gave into the dark side. Those Jedi many times had great talents and potential for great good. I just wanted to share his perspective and one of his favorite themes from the Star Wars saga. He also went on to say, also, the theme of redemption is obviously strong. The message of even someone like Darth Vader being redeemed because he repented for what he had done and ended up putting someone else's life above his own. Then his grandson does the same thing. Also, Palpatine is Satan. Thank you, Cam Ray. I agree. Palpatine is Satan.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
more Sidious is Satan. Palpatine's somebody else. So yeah,
They can both be Satan. They can both be Satan.
Cam Ray also then went to argue about pineapple on pizza. I just want to point that out. Cam, pineapple belongs on pizza.
No.
Disagree.
Oh. Twitter polls have spoken.
51.7%
say it belongs on pizza.
That's because they were making double accounts so that they could take the poll multiple times.
Yeah, whatever.
Hey, just because there's a majority doesn't mean it's right.
Woohoo!
Uh-huh.
So this one is actually a question, and this comes from at WSTR Media.
Great podcast out there, so definitely make sure that you check them out.
They are pretty awesome. Just saying. They ask, what is your take on Anakin's birth? Is it too close to the nose for Lucas to use that, or just wanted you to use this concept from the Bible? God/Force just made Anakin.
I think that I'm that we kind of hit on that already, obviously, but I think that goes into what the quote that David read, where where Lucas kind of used religion, period, not necessarily Christianity, but I think there were bits and pieces that got incorporated, and I think that was one of the things that, obviously the Christian belief that's one of the anchors, is the fact that it was a virgin birth, and I think that Lucas took that and ran with that. So I don't think that that's too far-fetched at all.
And there are other virgin births in other religions. Bringing Buddha back up a second, I think he just like straight up came down from heaven. I don't remember if he was actually like born from his mother, but that's another person who was conceived by an outside force and brought into the world.
And I think God being the force, I think, again, from a Christian perspective, you can look at it that way. But again, there's other religions that have a force or whatever, whether that's nature, whether that's, if you're Christian, that's God. There is something that is ruling kind of everything. And I think that's just, the force is just another version of that. So yeah, obviously if you're a Christian, that would be the connection you make. But I don't necessarily think that was, as Lucas was making Star Wars, I don't think he was like, okay, the force is going to be God. I think, again, it was just more of there's a force that kind of is in charge.
I actually have a quote where Lucas talks about how he didn't want to call the Force God.
See?
He's quoted as saying, "It's a thin base for theology. That's why I would hesitate to call the Force God." And then that's when he started to get into how people people from other religions could resonate with Star Wars as well. The stories from the Quran and the Torah and the Bible. It like his big goal with this, from everything that I've read, was to encourage spirituality and curiosity.
Yeah.
Yes. I agree. I think the comparison that is Anakin is, is Christ, the Force is God. I think all of those comparisons, just solidifying everything that Dave said and that we've all been talking about. I think if you're even in the shallow end of questioning where you're following into, I mean, I know Call to the Table is a Christian podcast, but you're gonna see what religion, what faith, what resources you've been diving into, what faith you've been diving into when you watch Star Wars, no matter which background that is. Or it could also go off of, like Dave was saying, sometimes it's, a particular day. Some days I see, Star Wars and I don't see religion at all, just because I'm watching it from, a glazed over perspective, where some days if I've been having conversation, or if I watch it on a Sunday after church, I'm really digging deeper and looking for those undertones. So it all really is based off of like what perspective you're coming from and what biblical background you're coming from. Next, did you have something you want to say?
I have something to say about them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Next question is from As One in the Force.
A wonderful patron of positivity in the Star Wars community. Thank you, sir.
We love them.
Or man, oh shoot, I don't know if they're dude.
Oh. It's okay.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks. They said, I know I'm a bit late, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the moral relativism. I don't know how to say that, and I'm not going to try. The concept of the gray Jedi.
Spell.
Relativism.
Thank you.
VIS. What is that?
Vis-a-vis.
Vis-a-vis. You know what? They just want to know our thoughts on the concept of gray Jedi. And Dave and I actually were having a conversation about gray Jedi right before this, and I came to a conclusion myself but I don't remember what it was. What was it?
I was like, sweet, she's taking this one, and then she's like, Dave?
What was it?
I can remember
I
our
was so proud of
conversation on it a
myself.
few days ago, Liv.
Yeah, but mine's now different. It's a different perspective. Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
It wasn't missionaries. I remember. Okay. So, gray Jedi are those Jedis that are not necessarily Sith, but have walked away from the Jedi.
They're practitioners. I mean, they're Jedi that also, I mean, they practice both the light side and the dark side of the Force.
Yeah.
You know, mixing light and dark makes gray.
Yes. So when we were talking about it prior to, I was kind of diving through these ideas of, well, it could be somebody who is being called to a location that is full of darkness, full of, Satan himself, the enemy, maybe somewhere that this individual God is calling to penetrate the darkest of darkest corners of the earth. And then we got to talking, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to change my answer, because a lot of times Christians see charismatic Christians as people who practice things that may be considered, witchcraft or things like that. And I'm not saying that's what it is. Hear me out, people. Hear me out. A lot of times charismatic Christians get labeled as these, demon worshippers, or they are a little too extra, or they are pulling from a different power that isn't the Holy Spirit. And we talked about this during spiritual gifts. One of the things that is constantly misconstrued is that charismatic Christians are essentially worshiping the enemy and utilizing these gifts to their negative abilities, which can happen. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. But the truest form of charismatic Christian, and again, I've said this before, I don't consider myself a quote unquote charismatic Christian, but a lot of people see me as that because I am a little bit more extroverted. I do have a little bit less of a traditional sense of my relationship with God. There is that. And I also have tapped into, and the Lord has given me insight on this spiritual gift that He has graciously given me. That would be seen as a charismatic Christian. And the Christians look at them and like, you're not really Christians. But then non-believers look at charismatic Christians like, you believe in Jesus. And that was how I kind of formulated this idea of, oh, there's a connection for me. Charismatic Christians such as myself would be would be seen as gray Jedi, those ones that are kind of underneath the surface and are going to penetrate you with Jesus real fast without you knowing.
I love how you said that.
I'm done. Anyone else have a comment on gray Jedi?
I don't know Star Wars enough to make a comment on that, so I am just accepting yours.
Okay.
I like the idea of tying in what we were saying earlier, that a great Jedi is someone who has officially left the Jedi Order, but they are still a Jedi, which makes them heretics in the eyes of the Jedi Order, and makes this but at the same time the Sith is like, yeah, but you're still a Jedi. It's that middle ground where they're doing their own thing, and that makes other people
I think it all
wary
comes
of
down
them
to how you
on
define
both
gray
ends.
Jedi. Are you if you're referring to like a socio status, you know, in the Jedi Order or out of the Jedi Order, or practicing the Jedi way, you know, the light side of the Force and the dark side of the Force at the same time. It really kind of depends on the way that you look at it. For me, I once again I don't really I have trouble subscribing to the idea of gray Jedi, because to me when I hear gray Jedi, I think of that as sort of like, what am I trying to say? I have an issue with the term gray Jedi, and I think this kind of goes back to my point earlier about separating the the group from the religion, like the church from the religion. So separating the Jedi way, the Jedi code from the Jedi Order. And, similar to being a Christian and going to church, because, again, men are fallible. And I think of somebody like Ahsoka, who left the Jedi Order, who is no longer part of the Jedi Order, but you don't get much more Jedi than Ahsoka.
Right.
So, like, this entire concept of what a great Jedi is kind of falls apart for me the more I think about it. So I don't really kind of see a place for it, to be perfectly honest with you. And, you also have other characters that do actually draw on dark side energy. Like, you have people like Mace Windu, who draws on dark side energy to have this incredibly lethal saber technique. And in Legends, one of the earliest texts that we have in the novels is in Dawn of the Jedi, where they do what is probably considered, Sith magics in today's world in order to heal. But they're still practicing Jedi back then. For them, it was just, you just have to make sure that it doesn't consume you. And for them in that time in Legends, it was about the motivations behind it, and that you don't let that, you just don't want that to consume you. Mm-hmm. So I struggle a lot with the whole gray Jedi concept. So I just don't really subscribe to it, I guess.
Unsubscribe. The last two are not questions. They are just real quick statements that I just want to give shout outs to. Andy Lemire at Lemiracle. He or she, they, hi. Many verses on fear and anger that seem relevant here. We did talk about fear and anger, and that's super, super awesome. And I just wanted to give you a shout out because you are awesome and pop that in there. And then lastly, Princesses and Padawans at P Padawans. Y'all's discussion should cover about 3/4 of the topics of conversation in my house on a given day. And I wanted to end on that because I think it's really cool having Pizza and Parsecs here on Call to the Table. It had this moment last night that when I was getting these tweets and getting these, responses, I saw my two worlds actually intertwine and collide, being nerd culture and my beliefs and faiths, and my two worlds of podcasting colliding. And I got to know and kind of felt a deeper connection with a lot of people that Pizza and Parsecs are actually connecting with, coming over here and saying, hey, we also have these discussions. We also do this. And it was really, for me, it was even more exciting, not only as a female nerd, but a female nerd who loves the Lord, and seeing all these other nerds who also love Jesus and wanted to get their points out there. So shout out to all of y'all. I was really excited.
I was about to say how because Liv, you were talking before we started this about how you weren't sure how you were going to do as being half of one and a fourth of the other. How's it been?
It was easier than I thought. Because this is discussions that Dave and I have quite frequently, because I look for these kinds of little details in movies all the time. And we'll get in the car and go get dinner, or we'll, sit down and be like, oh, I saw this theme, and go on my own little rants and tangents, and because that's what I'm looking for.
You're very good at playing the I Found Jesus game.
I love the I Found Jesus game. It's one of my favorite games.
You really do have an outstanding analytical eye for it.
Well, thank
you.
Well,
hats off to you.
Bless you.
I think David
How
just
did we
made
dub
that
it
up.
the iPhone Jesus game?
Well, this is the podcast where we're talking about Jesus, right?
Talking about Jesus.
Okay.
Talking about Jesus.
John, you wanted her to throw it in.
I have been wanting her to throw it in.
Well, and I have the creator of the song here,
well,
so
I
had to sing it. Dave created the song.
Yeah, you. Oh, wait.
Jesus. Yeah, I like playing that. Do you want to sing?
Do you want to sing for us?
I could not do as good a job.
Would you stop?
As Liv here.
That is false.
Oh,
I do not subscribe to that. I don't follow that.
so,
No hashtag.
so Liv, before we go on to our last couple points, because I know we need to wrap it up. This is going to end up being like 2-hour episode. Yes, we do need to wrap it up.
We have
do
more
you want to
points?
announce what this episode will be in relation to the season?
Yeah. So it's been really exciting, and we were really excited to be able to utilize this as our season finale of Call to the Table season
Woo!
1. We, as a group have prayed about it and conversed about it a little bit in depth of where we want to go with our podcast and how we want to pursue it forward. And one of the things that we came to the conclusion is we really need breaks. And it's really important. We need our Sabbath time, just like God calls us to have a Sabbath day, Sabbath year. We also need to take that Sabbath to move forward in a healthy state, in a healthy way for Calls to the Table. So we're actually going to start following the school system. We're going to start up when school starts and take summer vacations and take Christmas breaks. So this is the season finale. So Dave, Liv, you are our guests on season finale of season 1 of Call to the Tables. I'm so honored. Thank you so much. I had to do it. I was so excited.
Does this mean you
No,
have two
we have
sides and
Liv.
now one
David
is
has Olivia.
ours is Olivia and Pizza and
I'm
Parsecs
Liv on
is
both.
Liv?
I'm Liv on both.
Yes, but I called you Liv
Um,
before David did, so.
She lives long.
And Prospers?
Wrong property.
Did I just commit a sin?
You built it. No, I love Trek. I
I don't want to.
But yeah,
All right.
I'm honored that you had me on for your show today. Thank you so much. This was exciting for me because Pizza and Parsecs just geek out in general, and it was fun to have a very spiritual discussion with y'all. So thank you guys for having me.
You're very welcome. We liked having you, and I know Liv has been just ecstatic.
I'm so excited. I was so excited.
That's true.
Yeah.
She has somebody she can sit by now. All during the quarantine, she's been by herself.
So for our last topic, I'm changing the game up a little bit. We're going to have one more topic and we're going to play a game because one of the things that we like to do on Pizza and Parsecs is play random games that I just spur of the moment make everyone play.
Lovely.
So we're going to do that. Ha ha ha. It's called...
How come you never do that on Call to the Table?
I'm absolutely
because
thrilled. I'm going to win.
Till just now. It's called character comparison. I'm going to give you a character. You're all going to give me a biblical comparison to this.
Okay.
It was a last minute decision that I made.
Okay.
So we'll start with John and we'll go in order. Does that sound good?
That sounds
Sure.
good.
John, Jordan, Caroline, Dave.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so
Yeah.
I want to start with Anakin Skywalker, not Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. And just give me your real quick answer.
I mean, of course, the first thing with the birth would be Christ, like we've said earlier in this, and him being the prodigy, etc., etc.
Okay.
That was John's answer.
I say that's as quick as I can make that.
Jordan,
Yes.
do you want to answer?
Oh, are you getting it for all of us?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Oh, I
just-
thought you were giving us
yeah.
different characters. I'm slow.
She better because I have an
Um,
answer.
I mean, prodigal son. That's the best way I can say that. Prodigal son.
Saul of Tarsus.
Oh, that's good.
Jesus.
Jesus. Perfect. Okay. Vader. I'm so mean.
See, that would be more of the Saul, in my opinion.
Okay.
Really?
Because he does go out and hunt down the rest of the Jedi that he knows of.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I would say all the Pharisees in one person.
Okay.
I'm going to say King Saul in this case.
Ooh! Caroline, you're killing this.
I told you, I'm going to win. Dave?
I'm thinking.
You had time to think while we were talking.
I know. That's what makes this so sad. I mean, I'm gonna go the inverse and go prodigal son because he's the one that actually came home.
Yeah. I'm going to answer this one because I have an answer. It's the only one I have an answer for that I'm really excited about.
Okay.
I'm going to go with us as people and humans because we falter, we fall into sin, and we always are welcome back into the kingdom. I know that's a really cop out answer, but I was proud of my answer and I'm just going to take it.
Go for it.
Next, I would like for everyone to do Qui-Gon Jinn.
Sorry, there's stuff going on this end.
John's thinking. Do I need to start doing the Jeopardy thing?
I would almost go Moses.
That's who I was thinking. You're horrible.
Because
Darn.
Moses had the whole. He kind of went with how things went. He had first off, he literally went with the flow of the Nile, grew up in Pharaoh, then spur of a moment, ended up needing to leave due to his spur of the moment killing. Then, due to God calling him back to Egypt to lead the people out, aka Anakin in this case, of a desert of, just to add a little icing on top. That's just, where I'm going with that in my head.
Well, now I don't know. Darn you, John. I don't know. Come back to me.
Because me and David on the first one both did say Jesus. So.
Well, that's true, but I want to come up with a different one. Come back to me.
So I don't know Qui-Gon Jinn as well as I know the other ones, but I suppose because of his prophetic sense and the fact that he is the first person to achieve Force Ghost status, I'm going to say Enoch.
Y'all taking all the good ones. Keep coming back to me. Go, David.
Qui-Gon's a wise man. We've been over this.
So, Jordan?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for this one.
-1 point. Jordan.
Shush, Caroline. I'm going to take 10 points from you.
We're only doing 1 point each.
I'm in control of this game. I distribute points.
And the points don't matter.
And the points don't matter.
No, this isn't.
One for Anakin.
Yeah, you can.
Eve.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Very much, yeah.
I rule farm boy, tip my hat to you, sir. Oh, that was a good one. Okay, last one. I'm gonna make this a super, super easy one. Sidious / Palpatine. I mean, I think everyone's gonna have the same answer here.
Don't you take mine. Don't you take mine.
Gabriel. I like that answer. That's my favorite one. You win.
Be gone, Satan!
Hello, Shamu. Sorry.
Yes, that was my answer.
What, Satan?
Yes.
Antichrist. That's mine.
I like yours better, Jordan, because part of me's like, I gotta think of the most evil, unrepentant people in the Bible.
Man.
I mean, besides the devil, straight up, but because Palpatine is too sneaky. He puts on that good face for so long, even while working his evil machinations in the background, which of course works for the devil. But I was like, I don't want to just say what everybody else is saying, so I was like, I can't do Jezebel, I can't do Queen Athaliah. And then Jordan, Antichrist, it's like, yeah, no, that's perfect. It works with the government thing.
Oh,
yeah, perfect.
Liv and I had this conversation the other day of the fact that
y'all practiced.
Well, no, it was something that dawned on me while John and I were taking a walk, and so I was talking to Liv about it, and it was just like the way that Palpatine comes in, again, to me, is how the Antichrist will come in, and the fact that nobody's going to suspect that he is the Antichrist. And on top of that, one of my favorite lines, and it's funny because it's not a funny line at all, but at the end of 3, when Padme sits there and she goes, so this is how diplomacy ends, in thunderous applause. Nobody,
Oh, I love that line so
nobody
much.
is going to sit there and think that what the Antichrist is doing is bad. They're going to be applauding it. And that's one of my favorite things that she says, because she sees it. She knows that what's happening is not good. And hopefully us as Christians will see that what the Antichrist does is not good. But that's how it's going to end, is in thunderous applause. Everybody's going to be cheering for it. So yeah, Antichrist.
Just like the Roman Republic.
Yep. David. Oh, I forgot. David already answered. Sorry.
No, I wasn't
Gabriel
serious.
wasn't his serious
Gabriel's
answer.
not my serious answer.
I know.
Too late.
I
You said it.
was like, you know what? He already had turn. Skip. Sorry, David. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, Satan, because we don't really know in canon what his childhood was like.
I had a rural childhood in the country with Mummy and my little kitten.
Are you my mummy?
In the Plagueis novel, we get some insight. The Plagueis novel, which is Legends, by the way. So it's with that in my mind, it's hard for me to see. It's hard to see him in the Antichrist role, because he was not a good person when he was a kid. He consistently caused trouble. He was always getting into trouble, and he ended up killing his entire family.
Well,
so that's
Okay, so sociopath, psychopath, all right.
But on the same token, he is a master manipulator, and the Palpatine that we see in canon can be seen in an Antichrist sort of role.
Yep.
I am going to also answer real quick.
Go, Liv.
No.
After we talked, I did a little bit more thinking, and remembering things that Dave and I have talked about as far as Plagueis and Bane and all of the major Sith that came before Palpatine / Sidious. For me, I find his characteristics to be slightly more like King Harold, the king who ordered the firstborns to Herod. Sorry,
I swear I heard you say King Harold.
I did say King Harold. I read it wrong. My bad. King Herod. Whatever.
I'm sorry. I'm seeing this white guy that looked like King of the Hill, and he's just sitting on a throne with a can of beer in his hand, and y'all say the Son of God has been born here? I don't know about this, Jimmy. Get on it, would you?
Where's Maul at?
Anyway, that's my answer.
I've actually read comparisons of Sidious to King Herod.
Yeah.
Because he sent Maul to Naboo.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire concept of the Duel of the Fates, right? And how the Duel of the Fates is more about Anakin, the chosen one.
Yes.
And how that would set events in motion for him to, on his path, send him on his path to the dark side. So in a way, I do see that as, King Herod.
I'm never going to be able to hear Herod without thinking of Harold now.
Well,
Jordan, it's a little too Veggie Tales. I'm sorry. When I was doing the voice, I saw Nebuchadnezzar in my head, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's exactly
Olivia
it.
just created a new Veggie Tales character.
You're
you
welcome.
created a monster. That's what you did.
You're welcome.
Oh, goodness. All right, Liv.
All right, what?
There you go.
Send us out.
I don't do the send out.
I thought there was something else about
That's what I was wondering. I was wondering if there's anything else we need to say. All right, John.
Oh, yeah.
I thought we said we didn't want John's radio voice anymore.
I know. I'm sorry. We need to plug Pizza and Parsecs real quick.
Well, yeah. Y'all were the guests.
This isn't a plug already?
Yeah, we got to plug our socials and all the fun stuff. And then I'll plug Twitter for Call to the Table.
It's okay. John's got it up, so he can...
Just look up pizza and you'll eventually find him.
Look up pizza. You might have to bypass Papa John's Pizza Hut first.
All right, plug Pizza and Parsecs, Liv.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for having us. If you want to check out our show, you can go over to bit.ly/linkspnp, or you can also check us out on our socials at Pizza and Parsecs. We're on your Facebooks, your Twitters, your Instagrams. We'd love to hear from you, and we love making internet friends, so please be our friend.
Please. We like internet friends. They're fun.
And Call to the Table likes internet friends, so...
Yes, you can find us on Twitter at TableTeamC3T or Facebook and Instagram at Call to the Table Pod. Or if you just feel like using email, it is calltoThetable@gmail.com.
Oh,
Or .org.
interrupt you.
She was too busy being part of Pizza and Parsecs to interrupt me.
That's true.
She's a guest. She has to be polite now.
.com. I listen to your show. I know what's up.
Liv, you put him up for that.
I did not. I swear he
She
did
did
it
not.
on his own.
Oh, my goodness.
I was trying to find a new creative way of interrupting John, and I just got sidetracked.
And you just put your hand on Dave's brain and just willed those words out of his head.
It was the use of the force.
Haha,
You
wills.
will say .com at the end of the podcast.
And again, everyone...
Oh shoot, that means that you have a weak mind.
Dave does not have a weak mind. He's amazing.
Against Olivia, he might.
I'm just
I've got, like, a
saying.
day
I'm just
mind.
saying.
Not a weak mind.
That's funny. I like that one.
And I do want to take this time to thank everybody for listening to our season finale
Woohoo!
of Call to the Table.
Woo!
Oh my.
Oh, goodness.
May the force
done a
be
season,
with
guys.
you.
May the force be with you.
May the farce be with you.
Oh.
I'ma just say it. Bye.
Bye.
See you next season.